The next biennial budget is sure to be met with some scrutiny after the current governor's first biennial budget, where he was able to use his veto authority to get some significant benefits or some significant changes in that budget. So I believe this next biennial budget, not only is it going to have adjustments for the pandemic, but I believe that there's also going to be more scrutiny on that particular budget. The next biennial budget is going to come after the next gubernatorial election, which again I believe has the potential to be a volatile biennial budget. And so for me to be able to look at this refinancing and bring 4 years of stability for the next two biennial budgets, I think is a great benefit to the district. And then those final years, again, the debt payments continue to drop after that. So
we do have other debt that should be retiring within that same 4-year time period too, shouldn't we?
Yes, there is. We do have some debt that will not necessarily retiring, but it should be coming. It should be callable over the course of the next few years. If you go back to the slide with all the numbers on it in the red box, that's our total debt picture at this point in time, and we do have callable debt coming up in 2022. There are 3 issues there where, again, depending upon the market at that point in time, we may either look at refinancing that, or we may look at, or to pay off some of that debt early, or it'll give us another opportunity in the near future to relook at our debt.
So I'm very torn on this, because while I appreciate the short-term saving and the ability to put some money away and do some of our capital improvements, I am very nervous about extending the debt. Granted, this is only extending it about $500,000 over 2 years, but knowing that we have more debt that we could potentially be looking at refinancing in the near future, is that also then going to be extended? And are we then burdening the district even further with this debt that we have versus trying to get it paid off more quickly? So I'm just very torn about how I feel about this and what my vote should be tonight.
Again, and I understand that. I believe if there wouldn't be the option for the significant short-term gains, I don't know that I would be bringing this proposal before you tonight either. And actually, if the first option where the gains that we had were very small, again, I just didn't see that as being a refinancing that was that was worth doing at that point in time. The reason for bringing it tonight, again, the 3 things: the low interest rates, which when the next group of issues become callable, we have no idea what the interest rates are going to be at that point in time. If they continue to be at near record lows, we would obviously have to look at that to see if, as I said before, if the juice is worth the squeeze. At this point in time, while it is a short-term benefit, short-term is 4 years, and I believe those are 4 critical years in our budget.
Patrick, I just want to thank you for diving deep into this, because when we're constantly looking for breathable space, this gives us some breathable space for a couple years. Everything's changing, like you said. We don't know what's going to happen in the next biennial budget. We got, literally, that was just a lucky shot that we got. It saved our butts that he used his light on a veto. It gave us an extra $200 per kid, and that could possibly be going away. So, that's a pretty significant amount of money. So, even if this shores up that hole, that might show up, that gives us a little bit more breathing room where we don't have to affect the classroom at this point too. So I'm definitely in favor, which is why I seconded it. It's fantastic. Thanks.
And I think one of the reasons that I was in favor of bringing this to the board is that we're talking about putting this money into Fund 41, right, which is our capital project fund that we can use to fund our long-range facility plan. And this is a way to be able to have those funds available. We never know, if we're going to have to dip in and make a capital improvement project or be more this allows us to be more proactive and schedule some of those out as well. So the idea of being able to levy the savings into is it Fund 41? Yeah, okay, Fund 41, I think really helps to stabilize our long-range facility plan, which we haven't been funding for a while, or we've been minimally funding. So that's one of the benefits. I think the benefits outweigh the cost of the extra 2 years. I think the benefits of having the ability to fund some of those outweighs that.
And I want to speak to that too. I was actually going to comment on that as well, Amy. When we were in the Finance Committee before our closed session tonight, we were able to do a bigger discussion about these numbers as they're being presented tonight. But the idea is that with the savings that we realize in 2022, 23, 24, 25, those amounts of money would be diverted into this Fund 41. So then we could be more proactive about making sure that those capital expenses as they arose could be addressed in turn. And the other upside of that, as Patrick explained to it, and I'm sure he can go into greater detail about this, is that the longer we start, from the time that we start funding Fund 41, we get credit for that in terms of our school funding formula. So it doesn't, we don't get dinged on the other side for putting money away into Fund 41. And I'm explaining it very inarticulately, but it's a net benefit as in also the way that DPI looks at our school funding formula. So it'll be more beneficial in terms of what kind of aid we're awarded if we use Fund 41 in the manner that Patrick is suggesting, as I understand it.
So I'm all for the savings and thank you, right? I mean, when you can borrow money at a lower rate, that's significant, right? And clearly the numbers do. My only question is, did you look at it and say, without extending our debt, but borrowing and getting a reduced rate and comparing that? I mean, my only concern, similar to Kate, is I feel like we're kicking the can down the road, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Patrick, you've always said we know what the next 4 years look like or the next 2 years look like. We don't know what the next 7 years look like. That's my only concern. And I think it would have been helpful to have the facility discussion first, to know what we're talking about with this spend versus voting on the spend to then look at the facilities. That's my own, because I don't know what we're looking to use the money for. So I'm not super comfortable with it.
And what I can say is that in the other option to not extend the note brought between $10,000 and $15,000 a year of benefit to the district. And so nothing substantial enough for us to really be able to do anything with. Yes, we refinance the debt. It's going to be paid off in the same amount of time, and we really didn't have a significant monetary benefit on the front end or the back end in order to, for that work.
But wouldn't we on the back end, because we'd retire the debt, right? Now we're extending the debt, correct?
Yes.
So, that's my only point is I understand you don't save as much, but you get rid of it quicker, and then you have a significant savings because it doesn't exist. So, but I appreciate all the information. I'm just a little uncertain where that dollar is going to be spent on what facility projects, and again, I don't know.
I don't want to assume this, so you can answer this question. It's sort of in the same term, but right now, because we haven't put anything into fund balance for probably 6 or 7 years, we haven't done anything regards to saving any money or having anything for long-range plan for about the same amount of time. We have been very cautious, I believe, in holding off to see where we are before we fund anything. It's going to be in that same fund, correct? Where if things are going well, we have the ability to do it, we'll fund a long-range plan. Right now, it's kind of a savings account to be in hold if something comes up like the Eisenhower wall, correct? So to alleviate Susan's concern, it's going to be run basically the same way, correct? We take these savings, we put it in this fund with the hopes of doing the long-range planning, and if everything works out the way it's supposed to, we have this money left over, we do it?
Correct. And the way we're spending money right now is we're spending it out of the general fund balance. And so as a negative tertiary district, every time we spend more out of fund balance, we lose more state aid. If we're spending dollars out of Fund 41, we don't, those dollars are not counted against us as shared cost, and so there's no aid ramification for spending dollars out of that particular fund. And so,
hey, Amy, can I jump in real quick? Susan, I had the same concerns as you of extending the debt. I don't really like pushing it out, but I think at the 0% or the 1% interest rate, we're really just pushing out the principal because there isn't a whole lot of interest that we're actually paying on that. And then my other thing with that too is we go from, in year 2029, we go from $2.7 million in payments to absolutely nothing. And I feel like that's a big jump to all of a sudden free up $2.7 million in our budget. And I feel like this kind of gives us a little bit of baby steps and gives us, that extra $100,000 per year to put towards that facility. Because I feel like we put some of that off now, and I don't think we need $2 or $3 million per year. I think that extra $200,000 or $300,000 will help us close some of those gaps in parking lots and roofs and stuff that we have that we'll discuss a little bit later today. But I just wanted to share. I definitely felt the same as you on this before too, and I expressed those concerns too. But the more we went through it, I feel like I'm a little bit more comfortable with extending it. Now, if we were bringing in $5 or $7 more million in new debt, I definitely wouldn't support that. And I know you don't either, but I feel like this is kind of a small step to help us bridge a little bit of that gap.
She said thank you.
It's hard to hear, so I didn't want to just jump in, so I was trying to find a good spot, so I apologize. The one thing I wanted to add, too, is approving this does not require us to put that money in Fund 41. That was a suggestion. So I want to make clear that if I support this, we're not tying our feet to the fire of putting that money in Fund 41. Well, I think it's a good idea to do it. I just don't want it to be bound by this vote.
Right. No, it would not. That would be part of our vote when we set the levy.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good idea, and I think we should start doing it, but if in 2 years something happens and we need to change course, I don't want us to be tied to doing that. So, okay, good, thank you.
and I believe one of the benefits that the district is realizing in this refinancing is the original issue of 15 years, because debt can only be issued for a maximum of 20 years. If the original issue was a 20-year issue, we would not have the ability to extend it and realize any savings. So the reason for the extension is simply to bring us, as Jeff said, get our backs a little bit away from the wall for the next 4 years, so we can, plan, we can let the dust settle, we can, essentially get ourselves a little bit further down the road while we're paying off this debt.
Can I just have clarification on one thing here? It says here, despite the fact that debt is extended, the district still realizes savings. So am I understanding that to mean that even though it is being extended we're not actually going to be paying out more in payments over that extended time? We're still seeing a net savings in the end.
Correct. The extension of it still results in overall savings. We're not paying any more on our debt. We're just paying it slightly longer.
Mm-hmm. And normally I wouldn't be one of those that would approve of extending debt any longer, but I think that the way this is being explained, that the benefits really do, in the end, outweigh that additional 2 years of payments, and that I do like the idea that we're going to have a little more cushion there to be able to put into the long-term facility spending. And also, it's good to know that it's not going to have to be put there if we find we need it in other areas. So I'm in favor of this.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat, Susan. Happy about potential savings, but it makes me nervous to extend it.
And again, the only thing I would say is to make sure to look at the bottom of those issues and notice that the savings numbers are both positive. So we're not losing money. We just wouldn't be able to do much with it.
And I think, that third one too, that we are refinancing, that doesn't save the district. I want to clarify that. That's saving our taxpayers at this point. So it's $491,000 that we will not be taxing our taxpayers because that was addition to our levy. So that's a significant savings for our taxpayers as well.
Right, and that was one of the things that we talked about in the finance committee was that energy savings, the taxpayers will see a direct reduction if it's approved, if we approve the refinancing. So and it's not going to, it's $500,000, over the course of the life of that debt is not going to translate to a lot of money for taxpayers. But as Patrick was saying in our meeting, if you do enough of these over the course of time, it amounts to something. And that's positive. If we can save our taxpayers money, we should. It's a bucket. The way that the way that Phil explained it to us is that we're bundling these together to get the savings in the cost of the refi. So that's what it's a bucket.
It is structured as one overall refinancing right now. If it were split, you'd have a smaller issue bringing to the market. It's not to say that bidders would be uninterested in it, but they do tend to gravitate towards larger borrowings in the market to bid on.
Mitch, did you have another comment?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, I think we're going to have to do a roll call vote for this, just so that we get the vote on record. So the motion is to approve the refinancing proposal as presented. Diana, can you call the roll?
Ms. Wondercheck,
Yes.
Mr. Kurth,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Ms. Manley, Ms. Schulz, yes. Ms. Unger,
No.
Motion passes 5-2. This brings us to our next item, which is to discuss approved facility projects for 2020-2021. This is a motion that was brought forth by our facility committee.
Yeah, so as mentioned before, we now have some dollars to work with, and that was allocated in the budget. We have $250,000 now that we didn't have before for capital improvements in our budget. We had asked the Facilities Committee to preview our recommendations to the board, and I believe that that's been taken care of as of last week. And so I'll ask Patrick to kind of move it further into this item, as he was involved with the Facilities Committee. I do want to point out that further that in this presentation, we're also going to talk about future projects, of which that refinancing. Now, I think, I think it certainly will kind of make a little bit more sense as to the rationale behind it. Maybe we should have swapped these presentations, but we want to be respectful of our guest time. But just so that, because those dollars are real dollars, it can certainly make a difference. Not to say that $250,000 won't, but it would allow much more flexibility for larger type projects if we have those extra dollars to work with. So I'll hand it over to Patrick, and obviously we'll seek feedback from the Facilities Committee as well after Patrick is done presenting.
Thank you. You can actually go to the next slide. The Facilities Committee met after requesting a list of prioritized facilities improvements from Andy Stefanson, our Building and Grounds Director. And what Andy did is he presented to us a list or a group of facilities improvements that are very high on his radar, and then gave us what he would do as the first projects with the $250,000 or up to $250,000 earmarked by the board this last spring. The recommendations that were brought to the Facilities Committee and approved were 2 projects, the first of which is tuck pointing and caulking, the first phase at New Berlin Eisenhower at the bid cost of $122,000. And the second item that was brought and approved by the Facilities Committee to bring to you tonight was partial exterior door replacement at Elmwood Elementary for the bid cost of $63,000. If you go on to the next slide, there's a map of New Berlin Eisenhower that essentially shows what the bid pack 1, or the first phase of this tuck pointing, would be. If you look at all of the exterior lines, these are exterior walls of the building. All of those that are in the orange color would be included in this first phase. And the second phase is the green in color. So we're proposing the lion's share, no pun intended.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
That was a good one. I should get a gold star for that one, right? The first phase is the lion's share of the tuck pointing, and we have the second phase, which, if there are more dollars available, or if we have dollars available within the budget, depending upon how the year progresses, we may be able to expand that bid to include the remaining portion of the Eisenhower tuck pointing. If you go to the next slide, we're looking at replacing exterior door units 9, 12, 14, and 18. You can see those are marked on this particular map. The doors that we currently have on at Elmwood they're a hollow core metal door, and once water gets inside of those doors, once they lose their integrity, when they get warm, they swell, the metal will swell, and it becomes a safety issue because the doors are difficult to open, and these are egress doors. Then in the winter, if you get any water in those, the water expands, and the same thing happens. So you're really replacing these doors with a much higher quality LRP door, I believe is what they're called. They are a much more solid door that can be installed as a unit. Here again, there are other doors, exterior doors at Elmwood that do need to be replaced. These are the most critical. And again, leaving some flexibility there if we have dollars that are available to us as the year goes on, we could potentially expand this bid to include another set or two sets of the exterior doors that are of the highest priority to replace.
Patrick, can you please clarify what you just said? You said set of doors. I want to just be clear that we're not just replacing 4 doors for that price. Patrick, can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, each of these door units are, it's a set of 2 egress doors, exterior doors, with a mullion in between them. So when we say we're going to replace 4 door units, we're actually replacing 8 doors. And again, these are, the replacements are everything with that door. So the frame, the sill, the door units, the hardware, the glass, and the glass is coming with all of the shatter-resistant coatings that we have on the exterior doors for safety. And again, what we're adding to this it's making that facility safer for our children because we're not going to have any problems egressing when you hit the panic bars on these doors. The last slide that we have here, these are the other future projects that were included in this conversation that we had in the Facilities Committee. And you can see there's the remaining tuck pointing at Eisenhower is estimated at around $50,000. And that's why we said, you know, we were authorized to spend up to $250,000. If you did the math, you notice that we didn't spend all $250,000. We brought forth a proposal that we felt was conservative, got what was absolutely necessary done, but left some space in there so that if our budgets come in a positive fashion, we could potentially add some dollars to the remaining dollars of that $250,000 and potentially chip off some additional projects. Like I said, we do have some additional doors that could be replaced at Elmwood. We do have the Eisenhower tuck pointing phase 2, but then you also see some other projects that will kind of, if we just reminisce about the last motion that was approved by the board, those two $175,000 to $350,000 savings are going to allow us to have dollars in place so that if we have to replace the rear drive at Elmwood at the cost of $450,000, we have dollars set aside to do that. We have a roof section here at West at $260,000. We're doing repairs on that section right now, but if it gets to a point where the cost of the repairs are going to exceed the cost of replacing it, you know, we're going to need to just replace that section. And then we've got a couple of large parking lots, or another large parking lot here at West, it's just right out here, that is also in a condition that if we have, depending upon the winter freeze-thaw cycles and all that, this project could potentially have to get bumped up in order to maintain a safe environment. So these projects are still high priority projects for the future. The projects that we presented earlier, those are the highest priority projects that fit within that $250,000 allocation. And again, we're seeking your approval on that tonight, and understanding that we still left some dollars on the table so that we can, work at managing the facilities needs in the future.
Thank you. Does someone from the facility committee want to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve the facilities recommendations as presented.
Is there any discussion? Just those two, just the first two, the Eisenhower Tuck Point and the Omelet exterior doors. Are we ready to vote then? Can we just do a roll call vote again, Diana? So a motion by Mr. Halmer, second by Mr. Kurth. Please call the roll.
Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Mr. Kurth. Yes. Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Ms. Manley, Ms. Schulz,
Yes.
Ms. Unger,
Yes.
Ms. Wondercheck.
Motion passes. This brings us to item C, which is the enrollment update presentation.
Yeah, so I presented just a general update related to enrollment at the last meeting, and now have a bit more detail that we'd like to provide. Essentially, based off of what I had mentioned at the last meeting, we did see a decline. We did have 197 students enrolled in 1920, excluding seniors that are no longer enrolled in 2020-21. But I just want to clarify with the next bullet point, and this is the number that I brought to you at the last meeting, is that we are actually down a net of 111 full-time FTEs from last September. I did mention these areas that were impacted as a result, where we saw like the biggest areas of impact. And so we kind of took it a step further based on feedback and questions that were brought up by the board. I'm not going to necessarily read this all to you. You have the graph and the chart in front of you. The majority of those, just like I mentioned last time, almost 75% just moved. And I'll get into detail in that a little bit. In general, we did see an increase in homeschooling from years past. Not a significant increase, but certainly an increase. And then the other piece that we noticed was a slight increase in private and parochial schools. Anecdotally speaking, some of the feedback that we've received is people were looking for smaller class sizes because of the pandemic. Same thing with homeschooling. It was pandemic driven. And so we fully expect to have a lot of these kids back once this pandemic is done. So we're continuing to kind of keep our ears to the ground, keeping those relationships with those families to make sure that we are the future of where they want to come. Where specifically did students move to? Mostly within southeast Wisconsin, but interestingly enough, a big chunk of students also moved out of state and out of the country. So again, that's where you saw the majority of the changes was with movement. I did mention this at the last meeting. Obviously, the trend, this is certainly out of the ordinary. We were not trending this way. In fact, the complete opposite has happened. The next slide kind of shows what our actual membership history trend has been since way back in 1982. It's been a significant increase, and in fact, this year is one of the lowest years in decades. And again, we are attributing that mainly to the pandemic. One of the other things that we wanted to kind of see what was happening was this unique to New Berlin. I had heard, I'd heard that several of the larger school districts in the state have declined enrollment in general. Whether it's Wausau, whether it's Milwaukee, Madison, some of the other larger districts have lost significant enrollment. We kind of did an analysis internally here. These are unofficial and approximate numbers, but as you can see, we're not alone in Waukesha County. And, while, most, like even Hamilton, for example, they've got a lot of development going on there. They anticipated an increase of 75. They only got an increase of 25. While some of the other districts are actually holding steady and or slightly increasing. But as you can tell, we're basically in line with some of the other school districts and how it all happened. So finally, we attribute it to certainly more homeschooling. Certainly, we're kind of digging into this a little deeper to find out, did people choose a different virtual option than the virtual option that we're offering for whatever reason? We are actually doing things much different than we did last spring. And so maybe people thought we were going to do what we were doing last spring. That's certainly not the case. Also, in some cases, while we are being very flexible, we are holding a high level of rigor for our virtual learning students as well, which is different than what other virtual schools are providing. So we maintain the integrity of what we said we were going to do with high level of expectations and rigor for all of our students, regardless of which platform they were being supported in. Again, anecdotally, smaller class sizes at the private and parochial schools. Did families become more transient because of the pandemic? Hard to say. Again, we're still kind of going into that as we dig a little deeper. I did want to mention that while there is a negative impact, at the last meeting I did mention about a $250,000 decrease. After further digging between Patrick and I, we also are losing some categorical aid that goes with that I did not take that into consideration when I mentioned that $250,000 amount. We're at closer to $300,000 as a result. But meanwhile, we are making adjustments to essentially evaporate that anticipated revenue, which we've actually already absorbed. And we'll, when we present the budget for approval at the next meeting, it'll be a blip. It will essentially be non-existent. And then, what we had mentioned was the enrollment projections by applied population lab conducted. As I mentioned this at the last meeting, we went back and kind of took a look, and here's kind of what the impact was. And again, I don't think they were predicting a pandemic, and it's very difficult to predict anything in a pandemic. So I did want to just also finally mention that we're going to continue to monitor enrollment throughout the year and track second semester changes, and then we'll make adjustments as we need. Because of the volatility of enrollment right now, I had been talking about and mentioning that we were looking at a virtual charter school. Because of the volatility of enrollment right now, I do not feel comfortable moving forward with that for next school year, because there would be an investment to be able to do that, and not exactly knowing what's going to happen, especially with what we just saw. I'd hate to put us in a compromising position when things are so all over the place. So again, I know that Kelly and team are working. I think we're learning a lot this year about virtual school and virtual online learning, which has been great. And I think we're going to be able to offer a great product. I just don't know that we would be able to recruit and retain the students that we would want into that virtual school, given the unusual circumstances of which we're dealing with. So with that, please know that, again, we're going to continue to dig deeper. We'll continue to monitor and track. Financially, we've got it taken care of. But again, if this continues over the course of the next several years, it could become problematic, but then again, we would make the appropriate adjustments like we have as we've experienced declining enrollments in the past. Any questions?
I was just curious if there's any ability to know if those students that moved out of the district, whether they were in single-family homes or apartments?
I'm sorry, Jen, I couldn't hear you.
Is there any ability to know the students that moved out of the district, if they lived in single-family homes or apartments?
That's something we can dig into. And again, we do know that there is over at Poplar Creek, we experienced a pretty significant change, and that is where we do have some of the more affordable housing and the most multifamily housing. Okay. So.
Hey, Joe, real quick, do we have a breakdown on the private schools? If we're
Can we please turn the volume up?
Sorry, I can't hear you. It's too muffled. Oh. Do we have a breakdown on the private schools, at least in terms of elementary or high school? I'm curious if we're losing kids mid-program, or we're losing them early or later, or if this is an anomaly this year.
If you look at the slide, slide 3, it shows you which ones were IPing last versus the younger grades.
That's total, though. That's not private versus total loss, right?
Line 3 shows private. And how many students from each school chose private this year?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed that.
9 from our 3 from last.
Okay, so a majority was in the higher. All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Do you see this as a trend going forward and happening again next year, or is this kind of a one-off thing? Or what are your thoughts on that? I know it's kind of shooting in the dark, but
I think the pandemic is going to drive a lot of it, in my opinion. Depending on where things are, if things settle down between now and the start of next school year, I think we're gonna see some of these kids coming back, at least again, the homeschooled ones, and then the ones that were, in some cases going to the private schools, at least at the elementary. And again, we've actually gotten that feedback directly from them that the only reason they're homeschooling is because of the safety issues that they're concerned with. But we're going to continue to monitor throughout.
I guess the bigger number there is the students that moved away, and obviously there's nothing we can do about someone moving out of state. That seems weird to me that we lost that many students via moving this year, and that hasn't been a trend in previous years.
Actually, I might be able to add a little feedback on that. Just because of the nature of my new job, I'm actually able to see the amount of building that's going on just in Waukesha County, and it's ginormous. They're selling houses, they don't even have siding up on them, and the houses are being sold like that quickly. There are condo units that are selling for $500,000 a piece, and they can't build them fast enough. And the building is from, western Waukesha all the way to Madison. And the amount of houses that are going up right now it's astounding. It's astounding how fast they're going up. I'm in new neighborhoods every single day. And I'm just one of the people working on them. But yeah, I'm seeing just lines of houses going up, and they're all sold. So these people are moving out somewhere. They've got to fill them with somebody. So,
yeah, but I guess my concern with that, though, is the house is still there in New Berlin. So are we literally bringing in new families with young, and I know this is a hard question to answer, but are we bringing in new families with small kids? Are we bringing in older retired people that don't have kids? Because that house is being filled by someone else, and it's just strange that we're shifting kids out of New Berlin but not bringing new ones in.
That's a great question. We'll continue to dig into that, as we...
Yeah, there's no clear answer. Obviously you're not going to be able to take a whole census on the city and what's happening. I just didn't know if we're seeing any trends of larger...
You're not raising your kids fast enough. You got to get them in the district quicker.
You need more.
Raise them faster.
You're getting 2 and only 2. There's no more coming either.
We'll take 2 more, Mitch.
And maybe that's something we can reach out to. We have you have partners in the real estate. Maybe looking to see, are we getting families in? Are we attracting families to come to New Berlin, or just to kind of get an understanding of that. Because like Mitch is right, those houses are apartments are still there, even if it's an apartment. Someone moving in.
And they're filling up most of the houses. New Berlin's got a rate where usually if a house goes in the market, it's sold by the end of the day.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, they're going fast. So,
And that's the weird thing is if we had vacant, I mean, if this was 2008 and we had all these vacant homes, like it would make sense that we've got families moving out and evictions, but no one's filling them back. But I mean, you're like you said, houses are being filled in a month or two, and so it just seems to be strange. And we got, I think, as a larger picture, we have to think of the footprint and everything else that we have with the school district. Of if this happens again next year and we're down 200 kids, I mean, 300 kids, what does that mean for our footprint and how we run our school system?
Yep, agree.
Well, it is interesting that there's those other Waukesha schools that are, Waukesha County schools that are losing just almost as many students. So it's sort of like, well, it's not exactly like New Berlin suddenly going to Pewaukee or Conomowoc or something like that. So like, where are they going?
Conomowoc had 170, which is amazing. It's an amazing number. So for as much as I'm seeing built out there, it's crazy.
I was just going to say they should see huge increases because with all the building. I mean, obviously we're a little bit landlocked, but they're booming.
All right, any other discussion?
I'll be quiet for the rest of the meeting.
We have one more, or two more votes. You have to. So. All right, item D is to discuss approve policy 6144, investment of district funds, replacing current policy 3250. This was brought forward by the Finance Committee. I think we introduced it last time, but Crystal, do you want to introduce it again? Yeah.
So I would move the acceptance of and approval of policy 6144, which would replace our current policy 3250 on recommendation of the Finance Committee.
Okay, so I have a motion.
Is that a motion?
Yep.
Yeah.
Second?
So, That's okay.
I appreciate it. Anyway,
Thank you. Was there any questions on this? This was one that was brought, introduced last meeting and updated accordingly.
Great. And the only question I had, Amy, actually one thing that I wanted to put out there is, and I missed it last time, I apologize because I think I was on the phone for that meeting and I don't think I caught it. I think that in the standard language, this was a Neola policy that was almost identical to the current policy we have, but it updates our policy with some statutory references that we lacked. And the other issue was we were changing the designee to be the chief financial officer instead of the superintendent because that's more Patrick's wheelhouse than it is Joe's wheelhouse. My only question was, in the paragraph where we corrected that, or changed it rather, the paragraph immediately following that then references the superintendent, and I think they should both say the CFO, if I'm right about that. Is that right, Patrick? If you want to take a look at it.
Sure. What I believe is common to see in this is the superintendent or his designee.
Okay.
Which, in our case, would typically trickle down to me.
Sure.
But that way, you're essentially creating longevity of the policy.
Sure.
So what I would say, instead of the chief financial officer, I would say the superintendent or his designee in both of those paragraphs.
Okay, and I would accept that as a friendly amendment if somebody wanted to offer that.
I offer the friendly amendment.
Oh, that's so nice of you. Thank you so much.
Do you need a second?
Do you need a second for an amendment?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Second.
You do, yeah. Because I think and that'll put it more in line, it sounds like, with what other districts are doing, and then so it's a Joe's feat, and then Joe's got to designate it to probably the CFO and under those circumstances, or whoever right. So
Right.
that makes sense to me.
That's consistent with what the Finance Committee's been doing.
Yep.
And then you want some of that redundancy.
Yep, that's what yes. So I think that would be an appropriate change to our current policy, and I don't have anything else to say about that.
Cool. Is there any discussion? Can we do a roll call vote? Can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Wonderchuk?
Yes.
Mr. Kurth?
Yes.
Ms. Crosby?
Yes.
Mr. Helmer?
Yes.
Ms. Manley? Ms. Scholes? Yes. Ms. Unger?
Yes.
Motion passes. That brings us to item E, any action from closed session.
Yes, move to approve the employment services report as presented.
Second.
I think I heard Michelle's first. I have a motion by Ms. Manley, a second by Ms. Schultz to approve. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, raise your right hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. That brings us to future meetings and dates. We have a Personnel Committee meeting on October 19th at 4 p.m. That will be virtual. We have a board meeting here in New Berlin West Commons at 7 p.m. on October 26th with a 5:30 Finance Committee meeting preceding that. And we will also be here at 7 p.m. on November 9th. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Mr.
Second.
Too late. Second by Ms. Schultz to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. This meeting is adjourned.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
You too. What's that? I know, right?